I'm Stacy Grinsfelder.
And I'm Daniel Cantor.
And you're listening to True Tales from Old Houses, the mini-sode from
Taliesin West edition.
We're here.
We're here.
We did it.
We're out of our natural environs.
Yes. In fact, we'll have to see how this goes because this is a kind of a new way of recording for us. Even.
We're doing handheld mics.
Yes.
Like we're pop stars.
So I just noticed that there's also somebody just kind of walked by in the background. There is a video of this conversation, but it may not be on YouTube right away because it's going to require a little bit more editing.
We're doing our best. But should we explain, like, where are we? What are we doing here and why?
Yeah. First of all, I mean, I guess maybe let's go back just a little bit more because I want to say it's not that big of a deal, but I'm really happy that all of this recording equipment worked.
Yeah.
Because when I picked up my suitcase at the Phoenix airport, it was broken, like trashed. And so I was a little worried about the contents inside. Fortunately, our mics are fine, the recording equipment. Some of the cases got broken, but here we are.
TSA, it's like
they're
your
hardcore.
stuff went through a garbage disposal.
Yeah. It looked worse than I've ever seen any piece of luggage come out of an airplane before that wasn't open and empty. It was one step away from open and empty.
We made it intact. Our stuff made it intact enough.
Mostly. All right. So let's get back to Taliesin West. Why don't you give a little...
Okay.
I know. I'm putting you on the spot.
This is like me pretending to be smarter than I am. So essentially, I guess the background of why we're here is on episode, I believe, 140. We interviewed Pat Evans, who's the registrar of the art collection at the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation.
Yes.
I hope I got that correct. It'll be mortifying if I didn't. Pat, I love you no matter what. And I've known Pat for years online, and she graciously invited us out here, and we kind of said, okay. And then found out that not only are we coming out here and we have sort of activities planned for us to see things, we also are actually staying at the campus. So this is a Frank Lloyd Wright property from sort of the tail end of his life. The Taliesin Fellowship is what it was called. And he started it in the early 30s, sort of kind of as a response to the Great Depression, because these big building projects sort of dried up and it's like, oh, what are we going to do now? So the line they said to us earlier was, well, now that we can't build buildings, let's build architects. And so this was sort of this place that was temperate in the winter, unlike the other estate, the other Taliesin, which is in Wisconsin.
And it's worth noting, too, is that this was his personal residence. So unlike a Frank Lloyd Wright museum house that you might go to that he designed for someone else, this is where he lived.
Yes, he had a residence here with his wife, Olgivanna, as well as all of these apprentices and people who are part of this fellowship. So my understanding is people would sort of arrive as apprentices, maybe, and then maybe stay forever, maybe move on to something else. So for instance, I learned I am in Cornelia's old living room. Cornelia, I think it's pronounced Brierly, but it could be Brierly. I'm not totally sure, and I apologize. But she started at the fellowship, I think was the first woman, was here for about a decade, then left and did private practice with her husband for 12 years, and then came back in a different position, no longer an apprentice, and then lived here until her death, which was 14 years ago, something like that.
Very accomplished woman.
Yes. And I'm just straight up sleeping in her living room.
Yeah. Tell him the most interesting, well, that she is the most interesting thing, but tell them, who's your neighbor?
Oh, yeah. So my neighbor is her daughter who was born and raised here. Well, no, I'm sorry. I take that back. I don't think she was born here. She was raised here. Yeah. Moved away when they did the private practice, came back. So she's elderly now, but continues to live here. And I haven't met her yet because she was out yesterday.
No, we met her husband, but we have not met, or I'm sorry, we've met Arthur, but I don't know if it's her husband. Doesn't really matter.
We've met a man.
We've met a man and they're together.
I believe they're married.
I think they're married too. So, and I'm in the John R. apartment, which we're actually recording in right now. And I took some photos and some video and put that on Instagram. Now, one thing, because we know this video is going to come out later on YouTube, if we can get to it, hopefully. And we know in the meantime, we're going to be talking about some spaces and some things that we have seen that, you know, this is a podcast. This is audio. We know you want to see it. So I'm going to compile all of our photos and such and put it in a blog post on the True Tales from Old Houses website. So I'll link that in the show notes. But after you've listened to this episode, you can go over to True Tales from Old Houses and you'll find the pictures there. It'll be pretty neat. We've been kind of shutterbugs. Like, it's really hard to just not take photos of every single thing we're shown.
It's incredibly beautiful.
Yeah.
So having slept a night at Taliesin West, what are your feelings about your accommodations?
Well,
I love your apartment.
I know. My apartment is absolutely wonderful. It is so quiet. That is the thing that I can't get over. Now, I live in a small town. I don't live in a city. So it's not like there's a cacophony of like ambulances or noises or anything in, outside of Lake Hill House. But this is like next level quiet, and it's dark. There's zero light pollution. So you've got this gorgeous night sky here in Arizona. Now, last night you and I were way too tired to check it out. But I think tonight we're going to take a little nighttime walk. And we've been warned of javelinas, coyotes, rattlesnakes, bobcats. Everyone's quite worried that we'll be picked off in the desert, but I have less.
Kind of
Are you? So
a little bit.
I have zero concerns about this. I mean, I grew up in the desert.
Right.
I have lived out west.
For me, it's still very foreign.
Yeah. No, I'm not worried about it. The javelina, I guess we didn't have those where I lived in California, but anyway. So after staying in Cornelia's apartment, what do you think?
Oh, I love it. I think what's so kind of cool about this place, I've been to a few other Frank Lloyd Wright properties, and they're gorgeous. This place is also gorgeous, but it was a laboratory essentially.
Right.
And so it's sort of experimental desert architecture, which of course for the preservation team can present real challenges because often these structures, it's the only thing like it really in the world. And, trying to figure out how to preserve that essentially indefinitely is very difficult.
Can I describe desert masonry?
Yeah.
So this kind of started out, Taliesin West started out as almost a camp, sort of it's different than camping in your canvas tent, but they wanted some place that they could come to in the winter months, spend the winter months, and then kind of somewhat disassemble it while they were gone back to Wisconsin for the summer. So desert masonry, they actually took the rocks from this land. They harvested, I think, what did they say, 2 years or something like that, 2 seasons? It happened really fast. They managed to talk a lot of people into coming here and helping them make this camp.
And paying to do it.
And pay, yeah. Wow, gosh, if only I had that much sway in my life, right? So desert masonry, they take the rock, they build forms, then they stack the rocks in the forms, and then they kind of just like, I don't know how they got the cement in. It's kind of looks like probably some sort of pumping project or even pouring it in. I think
they might have just poured it because the forms were like...
Oh, they were low.
They sort of build them in layers.
Okay. So they poured the cement in, which kind of filled the nooks and crannies, not entirely, but somewhat of the stacked rocks, and kept the rocks from, of course, falling over when the forms were removed. And then there's flat sides where the forms, where the concrete hit the forms and made nice flat sides. And then they would build the forms up a little higher, and they would just repeat the process. And so all the walls, I mean, at most, what are they, 8 feet tall? I mean, there's some tall things, but it's not a tall structure. In fact, Daniel and I feel really good here.
We're like so thrilled. Yeah. We're both on the short side, and everything just feels scaled perfectly to us. Yeah, nice low ceiling.
Right.
Super cozy. But yeah, I think that's one of the things that kind of keeps striking me is having seen these other properties where everything is very sort of like pristine and fitted and perfect craftsmanship. And here things are much more sort of homespun, make it work, a little rough. So like, I'm really enjoying just sort of like exploring my little space and opening all there's tons of just very characteristic of Frank Lloyd Wright stuff, a lot of built-in storage and furniture. And just sort of seeing how it's put together and that it's not unattainable.
No.
We can all do things like this.
It feels very relaxed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what were some of the interesting things I think we should share some of the interesting things that we learned on our tours. We've been on a couple of tours already. So we have an interview we're going to do later that we're going to share with you next week. Really excited about that one. But we also met with just several people, like the collections curator. And yesterday we saw a bunch of Japanese prints. Frank Lloyd Wright was obsessed with Japan, I think. Yeah. Don't you think? Like he's quite a guy, I wasn't influenced by anyone. And then he was influenced by a few things. And clearly Japan was one of those. And actually, I do think he admitted that. So
yeah, he did projects in Japan. He also had apprentices in Japan. I'm not sure if it was part of Essen or...
Honestly, though, I will see what I can find out because I'm really fortunate that my son lives in Japan. And so I'm going to get to visit him again in May. And now that I know about this Frank Lloyd Wright connection, I'm going to pursue it from that side of things, from the other side of the world.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Like, there's definitely a lot of things here that are just from Japan. Right. But then there's a lot of Japanese influence, I think, in the design.
So the question was, I guess, what are some interesting things that we've learned? I know I put you on the spot, didn't I? On the spot.
I mean, everything's been interesting. That's
yeah. Or some things, did anything surprise you?
Well, I guess having kind of studied this place in college, sort of the very classic reaction, it's smaller in person. That's fun. Like, in a really nice way. It's
more intimate, basically. Yeah, more personal, friendly.
Yeah, it looks huge, I feel like, in pictures. And it's sprawling, but everything is scaled in this very kind of intimate way, which I think sort of speaks to the community that was here and that this place was designed to be a community. And that I think continues to this day, but was certainly very important during Frank Lloyd Wright's lifetime and after, especially as apprentices or people who had been apprentices or part of the fellowship are still living here. So size, that was surprising. I think one thing I just sort of didn't, when I had learned about this briefly in the past, you learn about the buildings, really. I think the communal element of the fellowship and what that actually looked like, that is very new to me and something I'm definitely in the process of learning more about. And it is very dependent on sort of who you talk to about it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the thought that Indra still lives here and she grew up here, I think that's so sweet. And, she has a completely different feel as someone who lived here basically her whole life in some way or another versus someone like you or I who may have read about it in a book and made or drawn some sort of conclusion about what life must have been like or what Frank Lloyd Wright was like or Olgivanna or whatnot.
Because like many things throughout history that are new and innovative, there are sort of loaded social circumstances within that. And I think to be able to come to a place where that history is actually still pretty fresh. And there are people, including somebody we're going to speak to, who
That's right.
have lived here and been part of this community in a meaningful way beyond, the scholar of the book that I'm writing. Writing. I'm not writing a book. I'm reading a book.
Daniel's, you said it. You're writing a book about life at Taliesin West. I'd read it. I would totally read
extremely fictional.
Oh, where were we? Sorry, I cut you off. But yeah.
Things we've learned.
Well, we were just talking about perceptions.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I think being able to read about it and then also hear about it from all these different perspectives, including the curators and the people who are sort of running this as a museum site, and also people who actually, it's a cool moment to get to be here. If we came in 10 years, it'll be different.
It'll be different,
those people
right?
will be gone.
Yeah, because, I'm not going to speak for anybody's health, but John R., the apartment that we're in, he died maybe 2-3 years ago. I think it was fairly recent, and he had been here this whole time. And then we've got Indra, who's living here. Then we'll meet Fred, who has a direct connection here to the property. And eventually, we're kind of at the tail end of those tethers.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What a time.
What a time.
I just can't believe we're here. It's so cool.
I know. I was telling you today, Daniel, about how hard it is. I've done some of these on the road interviews and gone places to see things. And it's really hard to make the most of your time when you go someplace like this because you want to see all the spaces and then you're learning all this new history. And then I know that I want to share it with all of you who are listening. And there's just so much. So I do hope everyone will go see the pictures because, we can talk about it, but it will probably feel quite abstract unless you're able to see the photos.
Yeah. And the history of obviously Frank Lloyd Wright, the history of the Taliesin Fellowship, all of the different players involved. There's so many different kind of rabbit holes you can go down and areas to branch into. Cornelia, whose home I'm in, totally fascinating person all by herself.
Yeah. We were just able to go over to the library and you're going to check out a book, I think, aren't you? About Cornelia? You're going to walk over there?
Yeah. I was last night reading about Cornelia and that she wrote a book about her time here. And then I scanned the bookshelf in my room. It is not there, but it is apparently in the gift shop. So I'm just going to go.
Well, and it's at the library. Weren't you going to go visit?
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So we were just at the library, and they have a lending portion, I guess, for things like, I don't know, college students or people that there are still apprentices, not apprentices to Frank Lloyd Wright, essentially, but they're scholars and people who are here. Maybe they are on a grant to come and research something. And so they come and they live here on the property for, I don't know,
I think
3 or 4 months.
For like 6 months.
Yeah. And so they have this library at their disposal to read all about the time here at Taliesin West. I don't know, whatever their area of study is. But something I found really interesting, and I actually hope this was the case, is that a lot of people are here. So this Taliesin West is as much a laboratory for architects as it is almost like a desert laboratory for understanding the landscape. I mean, just the plants and the animals. And so I like the idea that people can come here and both learn about Taliesin West and Frank Lloyd Wright's time, but they may actually be honestly studying desert plants or desert wildlife or some sort of ecology. I come from a National Park Service background, so I'm always into that. I want to know how people are preserving and respecting the land, which directly parallels basically preserving and protecting our architecture. So this one, having architecture that's so close to nature that it's almost a part of it, is really a unique experience, I think. I mean, you don't get much closer than that unless you're visiting like I don't know, almost like ruins
like
from
Petra.
Yeah. What's Petra?
It's that site that it's a temple that's carved into the side of the mountain.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah. Okay.
So cool.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah, that sounds great. We should go there next, Daniel.
It's super close by.
Yeah. Speaking of things that are super close by, though, there is the Biltmore here.
Yeah.
And we may go check that out. That's another Frank Lloyd Wright contribution. So the Biltmore in Scottsdale, right? Not in Phoenix. I think it's right in Scottsdale.
Could be.
All right. We got to take a quick break. We'll be right back. True Tales from Old Houses is supported by Sutherland Wells. All of Sutherland Wells products are handcrafted in Providence, Rhode Island, with the highest quality, sustainably grown tung oil. Tung oil, which is native to China, has been used for centuries as a durable finish for wood, metal, and stone.
Unlike polyurethane, tung oil finish penetrates the surface of the wood, so it flexes and contracts as conditions change, which makes it the perfect pre-finish or protectant for everything from fine furniture to window sash and sills.
I've used several of the products, and I have a few favorites. Clarabelle's, of course, I use it to mix with my oil primer. I also like Slicky Wicky on the window jambs. It keeps the sash moving up and down really smoothly. Do you have a favorite?
I do. It's the exterior polymerized tung oil in medium sheen, which is what I used recently on my porch floor.
I think it's worth noting, too, that there are several sheen options in the Sutherland Wells products. And they also have an entire line. So for whatever you're working on, maybe it's siding, hardwood floors, furniture restoration, cutting boards, you name it. They have a product for you.
So to learn more about the complete product line, visit Sutherland Wells. That's WELLES, SutherlandWells.com. And to save 10% on your first order, use the coupon code TrueTales.
True Tales from Old Houses is also supported by Noonan Heritage Craftworks. Now, you may know Joseph Parenti from Instagram for his work with historic exteriors in the Pittsburgh area. He's now extending his offerings to homeowners across the United States with Noonan Heritage Craftworks.
Now, Stacy, you and I know finding the right help to restore and maintain your old house is a huge challenge. Where do you start? What materials and methods should you use? Who can you trust? Joseph wants to help you out with that.
You can schedule a phone call, a video conference, or an email consultation with Joseph to talk through your exterior project and help you game plan. So whether you need to prepare a scope of work, maybe you need a second set of eyes just to help compare estimates, or even figure out the right questions to ask vendors, Joseph can provide unbiased guidance to help you steer clear of pitfalls and ensure success.
To learn more about how Noonan Heritage Craftworks can work with you, visit our special landing page at Noonan Craftworks. That's NOONAN, NoonanCraftworks.com/truetales.
Welcome back.
Hello, we're back.
All right. we were just saying, we've just been here less than 24 hours. We're somewhat out of our depth as far as the accuracy of any more history that we give you. So I think we're going to save that for Fred.
Yeah.
Right. And he's going to be our guest next week. So he's going to fill in the gaps, or maybe we'll listen to it next week and realize, oh gosh, we were wrong about that.
Listen, we can be a little fast and loose, but we also, I think, have enough sense to basically know where our limits are. And we're not scholars.
No. In fact, both of us, I do. I guess this is the first trip that you and I have taken together.
I know.
And it's been kind of fun. Like, what do you think? I'm not that annoying, right?
You're a good spooner. Kidding.
So I prep to a certain degree, but I like a little bit of surprise. I don't really like to go into some place thinking I know everything. I like to be surprised. So I was very surprised by a lot of things.
Tell me more.
Well, I think most of it was just how much a part of the landscape it was. Mm-hmm. I was touching on that before we went on commercial break. But yeah, just how organic this space is. And you and I were in was it the drawing room? The drafting room, the art space. What is that? What is that called?
The drafting room.
Okay. So anyway.
The room with all the drafting tables.
Yeah. So there's a room and it has all these drafting tables and it has even the light fixtures. We were kind of looking at the light fixtures. That was what started it. And they were really kind of rough hewn, like out of plywood, maybe sort of a real geometric cut out of plywood. And then these light bulbs just sort of screwed between them. Again, I'll take a picture. It'll be in the blog post on the show or linked through the show notes. And so what surprised me was that things weren't more polished.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that now, having taken the tour, because that's exactly the way it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be sort of almost like a living, breathing building that changed. And on our tour this morning, we were talking about the fact that they would come here during the winter time, and then they would basically pack up everything or store everything and leave. And so if you can imagine, like, what if you left your house and you didn't have any heat in it and you didn't have any air conditioning, like no climate control.
I don't like this game.
No, I'm sorry. But yeah, I mean, imagine no climate control whatsoever. And you leave for, I don't know, 6 months or whatnot. And then you come back, some things are going to be broken. Some things are going to be, they didn't make it through that 6-month period. So there's this element of every single season having to rebuild parts that are broken.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is what surprised me. And so you see that in the way things are built. And that's the people that our tour guides and things. I think there was an interesting component of preservation here that they were mentioning that, part of it is they use a snapshot in time, basically, they were talking about, to make changes or to rebuild things or to improve things based on a snapshot of time because, gosh, I mean, nature always wins. I tell people this all the time. Nature always wins. It's not my saying, but it's the truth. Like, so you have to kind of pick this snapshot in time to fix things.
Yeah. Well, and here the snapshot was essentially Frank Lloyd Wright's life.
Right.
So in other museums, in a way, it's, I think, a simpler task where it's literally like trying to kind of get it to what it looked like on this day or this year.
Right.
Where they have a range.
It's like a 20-year span or something like that.
The place changed a lot over that time because they were constantly like iterating these different designs. And so, so one of the things they said to us was like, people always want to know what's original and what was added. And they're like, well, how do you define original? Because it's original to a period that Frank Lloyd Wright was here, but not maybe the first iteration. And like, if it were really all original, none of these houses would have glass.
Yeah.
I didn't know that actually until the first about 10 years. All of the things that now have glass were just open air. So it's also, the buildings are designed to create certain breezes and,
they're actual breezeways. Yeah. No, you're totally right. So there was lots of, as you can imagine, Frank Lloyd Wright loved his light and his sort of indoor-outdoor living of being able to be indoors and see outdoors. Yeah, no windows, no glass. I mean, glass really wasn't a thing. And there's a real funny thing in the what they call, it's the living room. And I guess Olgivanna wanted glass. Mm-hmm. She wanted to have glass in the window. She was kind of, well established. The Taliesin West was well established. She wanted glass. And so he said, fine, you can have it, but don't move anything. So there's actually pieces of glass that have holes in them that create a little area for pottery to stick out of them, because you couldn't even move a pot to put glass in. That tells you a little bit about Frank Lloyd Wright, a little extreme, but
or just kind of a jokester.
Right.
Who's to say?
Yeah. We were talking about that snapshot in time, though, but that's a good point, because Olgivanna, his wife, lived here for maybe 20 more years after his death.
Right.
So she had some ideas about how things should look and how things should function. And so when the crew now is trying to preserve this, they're still going back to that snapshot in time when it was Frank Lloyd Wright, when Frank Lloyd Wright was here versus Olgivanna. Because, the 50s is very different. I think he died in the 50s. Is that?
I think 59.
59. Okay. So we're talking 20 more. So we're talking the 70s. So
60s,
lots
70s.
Lots of wild
they were
stuff
saying,
happened
in the
then.
70s, color palette really changes. As you might expect. And things were done seemingly to make them a little bit more climate controlled or a little more weather tight or a little more, frankly, just convenient. And, and so they've removed some of those things to bring it back to more what it was, which is, it's just valid. It's so,
I could go down this rabbit hole for
I feel
a
like we're
very
just
long
bragging
time.
about our cool trip. It is, we're so lucky to be doing this right now when you get this overlap of characters and.
Yeah. And this is new to us. And for me, it's kind of opened a little rabbit hole that I would like to go down. And I hope that as a listener, maybe you'll be inspired to go read some Frank Lloyd Wright books or learn about Taliesin West. There's a lot to unpack there with Frank Lloyd Wright. Let's not sugarcoat it.
It's huge.
Yeah. We don't want to leave this episode by letting, with everyone thinking that we are just rose-colored glasses and we're like, there was some stuff. Some stuff went down. Some stuff went down.
But that's it's part of what's so interesting about actually being here too, is most of the people that we've interacted with are museum staff, essentially. And so they have sort of a partially academic, partially lived experience, and partially they're friends with these folks that were here in Frank Lloyd Wright's time. So they have a certain view of it. And then so it's just...
And then if you've just read a book, then you have a certain view based on the book.
You might or if you bought a book, realized you essentially forgot how to sit down and read a book.
We're not saying
so you read 92 pages of a book and then want to sit on a podcast and spout off about it.
Right.
That's also a thing.
We're not saying that happened, but...
That didn't happen.
Yeah. All right.
To Stacy.
Yeah. Definitely happened to you. So before we end today, we have a few more minutes, and I found out something about you recently, and it kind of, this trip dovetails nicely into that. And I thought you might want to share a little bit about it.
Oh, are we ready to talk about it?
Why not? Okay. Why not? We've got a few more minutes. Daniel, he's always got something in his pocket.
I did something. The timing of this has ended up being really funny, unplanned, but just wild, because I may have earlier this week purchased 4 acres of raw desert land. I just own 4 acres of desert.
I can't believe you did this. You told me this. And I said, what? What are you talking about? Yeah. So I'm very excited for you. Tell the people about your land.
Yeah. So, the basic genesis is my dear, dear friend, Anna Dorfman of Door 16 moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico about 10 years ago, almost. And, a few years ago, she was like, you can buy just raw land for very little money and then kind of do what you want. And so she did. So she literally online, you can just buy land.
Wow.
And so she bought, I think, 2 acres and fabulous vintage it's not an Airstream, but it's similar. And, has this really cool kind of getaway. And I just thought that was amazing. And I was so proud of her when she did it. I just think this is the coolest project. And then about a year ago, she's like, there's 4 acres next to me are for sale. And I'm like, well, no, but what a fun plan, but no.
Right.
And I just kind of never stopped thinking about it. And I have no idea quite why. But to put it in context, I totaled my 10-year-old car recently. The land cost less than the insurance payout from the car.
Gosh.
So we're not talking about huge numbers here.
Right.
But
wow,
what I really love about it and what is feeling so sort of timely in this moment of getting to be in this place is that it's kind of like mini Taliesin, where much like when they found this land, like they could do whatever they wanted with it. And that's pretty much my situation. So there are other land situations where there are, codes and stuff. Mine, like, there's no building codes.
Right.
So I'm not planning anything immediate.
A yurt. You're going to put a yurt on there.
I have secured the deed and now it's there. And maybe I do something really cool with it someday and governing body gets to tell me how to not do it.
Yeah, that's what's so different about the West, because where you and I live in New York, I mean, I know this because I've lived out West. So I've seen the difference between the West and the East. And so where we are, we're pretty highly regulated with permits, and there's all kinds of people in your business when you want to build something where we live. But out West, there's a lot less of that. But then we're talking about to the extreme.
To the extreme.
Yeah, where they're
lawless
like,
land.
Well, you just want to live out there forever with nothing and pan for gold, then by all means, it's your land. You do what you want. So
mineral rights, water rights.
So you have mineral
rights. I've learned about catchment.
Yeah. The first question, we should, last week when you told me about this property and I said, do you have water rights? And what did you say to me?
I said, what's that, Stacy?
What's that? So now that you know,
this is a real insight
tell the people
into how I make decisions. Well, so my understanding is catchment rights are when whatever water you can collect from like the rain. So if you have some sort of roof system that drains water into a pipe, whatever. Water rights generally refer to if you can drill a well and use the water that comes out of that well. Mm-hmm. And I guess the answer is yes.
Yeah. And that's a huge thing out West because water is so scarce. So let's say, your watershed is not highly, well, I guess I would say that's probably the thing that is regulated out West. When I said there's not much going on, nobody's in your business, but they are about water because every single time, if you've got a river or wherever their water's coming from, it's finite, which we don't think a lot about on the East Coast where we're constantly getting rain and, our clothes are mildewing and like we can't stop getting water. But out West, you could just never get enough of it. And so anybody who's tapping in through the well is taking groundwater, is taking away from that. And, if you're upstream and you're taking all of it, then the farther down you get, the less there is for someone else. So, yeah. So water rights are a thing. When you get land, you purchase, you want to make sure it comes with water rights.
Evidently, I have them.
And evidently you have them. So I'm very excited about that. It's not going to be old house related because there's nothing on the land. But I guess, you know what? You could move something. You could move like a miner's shack. Yeah, would you move a miner's shack?
I would and can too.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a totally nonsense decision that I have made that also feels like, I don't know, just very exciting and very like, just put that away for the future. And then it's there. And I just think it isn't the worst idea I've ever
Maybe
had.
When you're a lot older and you become one of those people where it's just like, my bones just hurt in the winter. You can move to your land.
That's what happened here. Like,
yeah, exactly.
At least the legend goes that Frank Lloyd Wright's doctor told him, if you want to live, you need to get out of these Wisconsin winters.
Right.
And if you can find sort of more of a climate like this, you'll live another 20 years. And he did. And he did, in fact, live another 20 years.
He did. And if we've learned anything from Frank Lloyd Wright, then we'll know that if you want to develop your property, then you can just have people pay you and come and you can tell them you're teaching them, which you will be. They'll be learning things, but they'll also be paying you to learn things and they'll develop your property, move that miner's shack onto your new land. So this has been great. I'm excited for you.
I think it's going to be cool. And if nothing else, what an odd experience to purchase property over the course of 3 Zelle transfers and a Cash App payment. How is this real? But okay.
Yeah, right. No feeling like you have to sign away your firstborn.
I mean, listen, my annual taxes are $79.
Oh, I love it.
I just don't think this is the worst thing I've done. But
I don't think it's the worst thing you've done at all.
Surprise, Mom, I didn't tell you.
All right. Well, we are out of time today. Be sure and listen. Next week, we'll be talking with Fred. He is the VP of
Preservation and Collections?
Yes, the VP of Preservation and Collections. We're really excited about it. We'll share that interview with you next week. So in the meantime, thank you for listening to True Tales from Old Houses live at Taliesin. And a very special thank you to our sponsors, Sutherland Wells and Noonan Heritage Craftworks.
To continue the conversation, please join us over on Facebook at True Tales from Old Houses. You can follow Stacy at Blake Hill House or myself at Daniel Cantor.
Don't miss those photos over on True Tales from Old Houses, and we'll see you next week. Until next time.
See you then.